One of these fighters cost $339 million each. The other cost about a tenth of that. Why? America built 187 Raptors, then stopped forever. Russia has built barely a dozen Su-57s in over a decade of trying. 2 air forces, 2 stealth programs, 2 completely different definitions of success. This is not a story about which flag wins. It is a story about what the machines were actually built to do. To understand the gap, you have to go back to 1981, when the Air Force wrote a wish list nobody thought was buildable. They wanted an aircraft that could cruise faster than sound without afterburner, vanish from enemy radar, and still outturn a knife fight. That program became the Advanced Tactical Fighter. Lockheed won it. The result was the F-22 Raptor. Development alone ran past $67 billion before a single squadron went operational. Russia's answer came later and from a very different starting position. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and with it went the money for a serious stealth successor to the Su-27. For nearly 2 decades, Russian stealth research existed mostly on paper. The PAK-FA program, what became the Su-57, didn't fly until 2010. That's 19 years after the Raptor first flew. Same mission, wildly different clocks. Now look at how each country actually chose to make its jet invisible. The philosophies could not be more different. The F-22's shape is obsessive. Every panel edge, every gap, every seam is aligned to bounce radar energy away from the receiver, not back at it. Its weapons live inside the fuselage. No pylons, no exposed missiles, nothing to reflect a signal back home. Radar-absorbent coatings cover the skin. They're expensive, they're fragile, and after every mission they need hours of maintenance just to stay effective. That maintenance burden is one of the quiet reasons the Raptor got so expensive to keep flying. The Su-57 took a different bet entirely. Its designers accepted a larger radar signature from the front in exchange for something else: cost, maintainability, and raw aerodynamic performance. Independent radar analysts estimate the Su-57's frontal cross-section is measured in single-digit square meters, not the fractional numbers claimed for the F-22. In plain terms, the Raptor is built to not be seen. The Felon is built to be seen late and to survive what happens next. That single design choice explains almost everything that follows: the cost, the timeline, the numbers built. Now let's talk about the engines, because both programs nearly died here. The F-22 flies on the Pratt & Whitney F-119, an engine built specifically to let it supercruise. Sustained supersonic flight without afterburner. That single capability, cruising at Mach 1.5 without burning fuel at combat emergency rates, took years and billions to perfect. Russia's engine story is messier, and it's still not finished. Early Su-57s fly on the AL-41F1, essentially an upgraded Su-27 engine. It works, but it isn't the engine the airframe was designed around. The real engine, the Izdelia 30, only began flight testing years into the program, and full-rate production is still catching up. That means most Su-57s built so far are flying underpowered compared to their own design spec. Imagine building a sports car and shipping half the fleet with last generation's engine because the new one isn't ready. That's the Felon's reality. The F-22 had its own engine nightmares too. Cost overruns, technical delays, congressional hearings that nearly killed the whole aircraft in the 1990s. But America finished the job. Russia is still finishing it. So why did one country stop building its stealth fighter at 187 jets when it originally planned for 750? The answer is money, timing, and a war that never happened the way planners expected. The Raptor was designed in the Cold War's final years to beat Soviet fighters that never got built in numbers. By the time it entered service in 2005, the enemy it was built for had already dissolved. Instead, America was fighting insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan, wars with no enemy air force to dominate. The Raptor, brilliant as it was, had almost nothing to do. At around $150 million per airframe and climbing, Congress asked a hard question: why keep buying a fighter for a war that isn't happening? In 2009, Defense Secretary Robert Gates capped production at 187 jets and shut the line down. The tooling, the jigs, the supply chain, all of it was dismantled. Restarting F-22 production today would take years and cost billions just to relearn how. America built the best air superiority fighter of its era, then quietly closed the door on ever building another one. Russia's production story is a different kind of failure. Not too few jets by choice, but too few by capacity. Sanctions after Crimea in 2014 cut Russia off from Western-made electronics and composite materials it needed for the Su-57's avionics. Engineers had to redesign components mid-program to use domestic parts, some of them years behind the original spec. Then in 2019, a prototype crashed during factory testing near Komsomolsk-on-Amur, a sensor fault during a control check. It set the program back months, right as it was trying to prove it could scale. Add the economic strain of the war in Ukraine, and Russia's defense budget is stretched across artillery shells and drones, not just fifth-generation fighters. Export orders were supposed to help fund the program. India walked away from its joint development deal in 2018, citing cost and stealth performance concerns. Without that partner's money, Russia had to fund nearly all of it alone. So while the F-22 stopped because America decided it had enough, the Su-57 stayed small because Russia never had enough to build more. Two very different reasons. The same result, a stealth fighter that never reached the fleet size its designers imagined. But numbers on a spreadsheet don't tell you what a jet actually does in the air, so what does stealth really buy you? It buys you the first shot. In a beyond visual range engagement, the fighter that gets seen last usually wins. A jet with a lower radar cross-section can close within missile range of an enemy fighter before that enemy even knows it's there. That's not a small advantage. In simulated exercises, Raptors have posted kill ratios reported as high as 108-0 against fourth-generation fighters. Those numbers come from training, not war, but they show what a stealth plus sensor fusion advantage looks like in practice. The F-22's sensor suite doesn't just hide the jet, it makes the pilot see more than the enemy can. Its AN/APG-77 radar can track multiple targets while staying nearly undetectable itself, using a technique called low probability of intercept. The Su-57 counters with something the Raptor doesn't have: thrust vectoring nozzles that let it turn and point at extreme angles most jets can't match. If a fight ever gets close, inside visual range, the Felon's agility becomes a real equalizer against a stealthier but less maneuverable opponent. So the real comparison isn't stealth versus no stealth. It's stealth and sensors versus agility and numbers you don't quite have. Neither jet has fought the other. What we know comes from exercises, leaks, and a handful of real-world deployments. The Su-57 has flown combat missions over Syria, launching standoff missiles from outside contested airspace. It's also reportedly flown limited sorties over Ukraine, though Russia has kept it well back from the most contested airspace, protecting a fleet it can't afford to lose. That caution tells you something important. When you only have a dozen of something, you don't risk it. The F-22 has never faced a peer air force in combat either. It has flown strikes in Syria and Iraq, overkill for the missions it was given. It's a fighter built to win a war against Russia or China that so far has mostly guarded skies against threats that don't need it. In 2023, an F-22 shot down a Chinese surveillance balloon off the coast of South Carolina, using a missile built for supersonic fighters on a target moving at walking pace. It was almost funny. The most expensive fighter ever built, tasked with popping a party balloon. But it also proved the jet still does exactly what it was designed to do: own the sky, completely without contest. So which program actually won? It depends entirely on what you think the mission was. If the goal was building the single most dominant air superiority fighter on Earth, America succeeded completely, then stopped building it too soon. If the goal was staying relevant in the stealth fighter conversation on a fraction of the budget, Russia succeeded too. Barely, slowly, imperfectly. Unit numbers make for a dramatic headline: 187 versus roughly a dozen, but numbers alone don't decide fights. A fighter that never flies combat because its own air force is too cautious to risk it contributes nothing in a real war, no matter how advanced it is on paper. And a fighter so exquisite it can't be exported, upgraded cheaply, or built again becomes a museum piece the moment its production line closes. That's the paradox sitting at the center of both programs. Excellence and scarcity travel together more often than anyone likes to admit. Meanwhile, China is watching both stories closely, building its own J-20 in numbers neither America nor Russia can currently match. The next chapter of stealth air power may not be decided by who builds the best jet, but by who can actually keep building it at all. The Raptor and the Felon were never really racing each other. They were each racing their own country's ability to afford the future. If you want the next breakdown of how these machines actually work, subscribe to Flight Deck. The engineering is where the real story lives. 200 Raptors were ever built, and America closed the line in 2011, choosing to spend its next dollar on something newer. That choice looks strange until you remember what replaced it on the balance sheet. The F-35 was never a better dogfighter than the Raptor. It was a cheaper way to put stealth in front of 1,000 pilots instead of a few hundred. America didn't abandon air superiority. It decided air superiority was too expensive to keep building one airframe at a time. Russia never got that luxury of choice. There was no cheaper stealth jet waiting in reserve. The Felon had to be the answer to everything at once. Cheap enough to build, capable enough to matter, and it still couldn't be either. Fewer than 2 dozen are in service today. Some of those airframes were assembled from parts sitting in storage for years. That is not a rounding error. That is a country building a 5th-generation fighter at the pace of a boutique workshop. So the comparison people want to make, Raptor versus Felon, kill ratio against kill ratio, was never the honest question. The honest question is, which country could keep paying the bill long enough for the jet to matter? America answered that question with volume. Build enough F-35s that stealth becomes normal, not exotic. Russia answered it with scarcity, treating each Felon less like a weapon in a fleet and more like a demonstration that the capability exists at all. That's the real lesson buried in these two airframes. Stealth was never just a shape or a coating. It was always a bet on how many of these very expensive machines a nation could actually sustain, flying, maintaining, and replacing for decades. One program won that bet by building fewer, better jets and spreading the risk downward. The other is still trying to place the bet at all. Whatever comes after the Raptor and the Felon will be judged the same brutal way, not by top speed, not by radar cross-section, but by whether the country writing the checks can keep writing them. That's the part the spec sheets never show you. Follow Flight Deck for more of it.